Put my foot down and refused to babysit my sister's kids for free anymore, leading to her cutting me off. I'm 29, child-free by choice, and my sister Carlene, who's 27, is a single mom with 2 little boys, 3, 5 and 2 years old. We live close by, and because we're all the family we have, I've been a huge part of their lives since the beginning. Despite loving my nephews dearly, I have my own career in social work, and, honestly, life pulls me in so many directions as it is. I'm exhausted. The truth is, I didn't want kids myself for good reasons, but now I find myself watching Carlene's boys anywhere from 10 to 20 hours a week. It didn't start this way. At first, it was manageable, just helping out when she was job hunting, taking classes, or once in a while for her to have a movie night. I was honestly happy to support her. But over the last 7 months things really ramped up. Now it feels like I'm spending most of my free time at her house, always needed for some new crisis. Lately, it's because her best friend's mom is dying and Carlene says she has to be there. I get that it's tough being a single mom. I do. But lately it's starting to feel like I'm not so much helping as I am being used. The real kicker? If I ever have other plans, Carlene doesn't just ask again later, she guilts me. Sometimes it's a voice message, the boys in the background crying that they miss me, like I'm abandoning them, her saying I care more about myself than family or that she wishes she had anyone else to ask but doesn't. She calls me selfish, or tells me I should be ashamed for wanting a date night with my fiancé while she's forced to pick between her kids and her best friend's dying mom. It isn't just the emotional blackmail, though. When I finally do show up, sometimes the house is a disaster, there's no food around, or suddenly it's supposed to be bath day or put together gym bag day for the kids. These strange, extra chores always seem timed when I haven't jumped through every hoop she's set for me. At first, I thought she'd understand that I was helping as much as I could and that it would be okay if sometimes I missed a chore or two. But the reaction was immediate. She'd suddenly need to stay out later, or ask whether I'd done everything, and then the complaining would kick in. I'm embarrassed by how long it took me to catch on. At first I thought it was a coincidence that I'd get updates about when she'd be home only when something hadn't been done. I started to realize that, no, this was punishment for not being exactly as accommodating as she wanted, every single time. Another thing that gets to me, she often leaves without preparing meals or cash, and when I run to the store for groceries for her kids, she promises to pay me back. Somehow, each time, her promise turns into more guilt, that it's selfish of me to expect compensation when she's struggling, and that I should be happy to help my nephews. It's gotten to this absurd point where she won't even keep her word on other things if I don't totally deliver. Like, I asked to borrow a dress for a wedding, we'd always borrowed each other's clothes, and she agreed, until I couldn't drop everything and come over quickly enough when she needed me. Suddenly she remembered she needed the dress herself, 4 days before the event, and I was left scrambling to find something last minute. Another time, she promised to pick me up from my mechanic after dropping off my car. I waited, stranded, because she just didn't show. It took 2.5 hours for her to answer her phone. When she finally did get there, she acted so put upon, sighing about how inconvenient it was to have to drive me, even though she had agreed in the first place. Laying all of this out, I can't believe how much I let slide. I've been a total doormat. But yesterday was my breaking point. I told her I couldn't come over to babysit last minute again, and when she started up with her usual tirade about my selfishness, I snapped. I told her flat out, if she truly thought I was that awful and selfish, she had 2 options. Either she stops relying on me so much, sparing her kids from my supposed selfishness. Or, I really will focus on myself and refuse to babysit without compensation or do any extras without clear boundaries. She hung up on me without another word. When the adrenaline wore off, the panic set in. I hate confrontation. I was shaking afterwards. Part of me feels like I might have just lost my last family member, my sister, and I wonder what happens now. My fiancé tells me it was long overdue and that I should have stood up for myself ages ago, but he's always in my corner, so of course he'd take my side. I don't really have anyone else to turn to. My life is so full between work and the boys that there's no room for real friends. What if that was the biggest mistake of my life? What if I'll never see my nephews again? Maybe if I'd just hung in there a little longer, things would have gotten easier, but I don't know anymore. For the first time, I'm asking myself which one of us is actually being selfish. Update 1. During the first 24 hours after I told my sister my ultimatum, I decided not to answer any of her calls or texts. I figured she needed time to cool down. Little did I know just how relentless she would be. She called me 77 times and sent over 100 texts and voice messages. Most of them were her accusing me, saying I was a horrible person for abandoning my own family, venting all of her rage at my refusal to keep being her safety net. In the midst of this chaos, I sat down with my fiancé and together we drafted the rules I'd insist on if she ever accepted my terms. I never truly believed she would, but I needed to be ready. The boundaries were clear. I would only babysit up to 3 times within 2 weeks, and never for longer than 4 hours at a time. Meals had to be provided. I refused to deal with bath time or bedtime, and under no circumstances would I spend my own money during these times. But things only got more bizarre. Suddenly, I started receiving messages from an unknown number. My fiancé told me this was likely an app people use to hide their identity. These messages berated me for being such a terrible sister, now that I was supposedly forcing them to watch their mother die alone without Carlene there to support her friends. Somewhere deep down, I recognized the patterns, the voice, the language. My suspicion grew, and I am almost sure it was my sister herself, pretending to be her friend to guilt-trip me. By Friday afternoon, all of this weighed on me so heavily that I reached out to my supervisor at work. I made sure to ask if she was comfortable discussing this personal situation first, then laid everything out. Since my job doesn't involve children and I've never dealt directly with CPS, I needed advice from someone with more experience. Together, we ended up filing a report on Carlene. According to my supervisor, it was the safest step, especially now that things had escalated so much. She worried, as I did, that my sister's next move, if she felt cornered, could be to take it out on her boys, who she'd clearly already been using as leverage against me. Now, I've decided the only thing left to do is to give her another week to let things settle. After that, depending on what her new wave of texts and voice messages are like, I might reach out, or I might not respond at all if she keeps up the abuse. The thought of it makes me unbelievably upset, but I refuse to keep playing this game. I can only hope that, in the end, the boys will find some stability, since right now she's using them as pawns in her personal war against me. Update 2. CPS called me and asked for more information, which I provided as thoroughly as I could. They wanted specific dates, proof, anything concrete, so I sent them dozens of screenshots from my message history with Carlene. I made the choice to report using my real name. It felt like it gave the whole thing more credibility, but it was also a kind of punishment for myself. After waiting so long to actually make the report, now my sister would know beyond any doubt it was me. I'd have to face the fallout. Since then, I've only heard from Carlene and the kids through a string of abusive messages, nothing else. Shamefully, I found myself driving past the house a couple of times just to make sure everything looks normal. It does, at least from the outside. I've had my first Zoom session with a psychologist through work. It's already helped, honestly. She's been direct, we moved fast and I've already got homework about boundaries. Apparently, they're trained to push for progress quickly since we only get 5 visits, but it feels good to do something tangible. I had a long talk with my fiancé after someone suggested that, if the kids did actually need to be removed from Carlene, we might be expected to step in, foster, or somehow get involved. We aren't. We don't want kids. That's always been true for both of us. Even the idea of day-to-day family life with children sounds suffocating and exhausting. There's just nothing about it that appeals to us. We don't even want pets. I know that if we stepped in, we'd start to resent it and probably lose ourselves in the process. At this point, I'm not sure how much more there is to update unless Carlene or the kids actually try to contact me again. Right now, I'm honestly afraid to reach out. Anything I send would just be met with more insults and I doubt she'd even read it. Update 3. Today was my birthday. I turned 30, hooray for me, and honestly, it was just another regular workday. I didn't expect much out of it. When I finally made it home, I found my sister, Carlene, waiting for me. My fiancé hadn't arrived yet, so it was just the two of us. She congratulated me, and at first, she actually seemed normal, nothing out of the ordinary. But then, when I didn't react to her the way I usually do, hovering and making sure she was okay, always asking if there was anything I could do to help, she got annoyed. It was like she was waiting for an excuse to be irritated. Suddenly, she accused me, said she always knew I never loved the boys, that I was just jealous I didn't have kids myself. She claimed I was trying to get the boys to love me more, so I could file fake reports to CPS and steal custody from her. The accusation was just so bizarre, I actually laughed. I told her point blank that I didn't even want kids, and even if hers were shoved at me, I wouldn't take them. Maybe it was cruel, but I was just exhausted, mentally and emotionally drained from all of this. If anything, my candor made her angrier. She started to yell, saying how devastated the boys would be now, how I'd proved I didn't love them by abandoning them. At that point, I realized there was no way to win. I asked her why she was even here, and where the kids were. She shot back that it was none of my business where they were, and told me she'd come solely to inform me that I'd never see them again. Maybe she thought that would break me, but I'd already accepted it might come to that. Hell, I'd considered that the likely outcome, so her announcement didn't even faze me. My reaction, or lack thereof, seemed to infuriate her even more. She lunged forward, trying to grab me, but thankfully I'd kept a good 6 feet between us. I turned and darted inside the building, slammed the door behind me, grateful it locks automatically. She chased after me, so I shouted through the door that I'd call the police if she didn't leave right then. She kicked the door and stormed off without saying another word. I eventually made my way up to our apartment and collapsed onto the floor. My hands shook so badly I couldn't even write, so I recorded everything in a voice memo on my phone, just in case I needed to go to the police or contact a lawyer later. I sat there, breathing, for about 20 minutes until I heard the door lock rattle. My heart just about exploded, until I realized it was only my fiancé coming home from work. He found me on the floor and, of course, freaked out. I told him everything. He said we needed to file a police report, and that we should also inform the CPS caseworker about Carlene's erratic behavior. I'm still uneasy about reporting her. We went through so much worse as kids, and no one ever reported our parents, but my fiancé asked me, would you report this if it was someone else's family at work? I told him that wasn't fair. I don't even work with kids anymore, precisely because of all this. But deep down, I know I would. It's late now and I can't sleep, my mind racing about what to say in the police report and what to share with CPS. I guess I'll just explain everything and let them decide what matters. The only silver lining is that CPS already let us know earlier this week that Carlene is under investigation. They even gave me her caseworker's contact info, so if nothing else, at least that particular report will be easy to make. Update 4. Sorry it's taken me a while to write this out. I've been trying to keep myself busy, picking up extra shifts at work, because I miss the boys more than I expected. I haven't heard from them at all since the night my sister barged over and kicked at our door. That day feels like another world now. CPS has reached out to me a few times, but since I told them we wouldn't be willing to take the boys in unless there was absolutely no other option, not even for a temporary foster placement, they've started telling us less and less about what's happening. I get it, we're basically outsiders at this point. Still, it's a strange feeling, not knowing much about their situation anymore. There's a family court date set for next month. My fiancé and I have been debating whether to ask if we can attend, but I honestly doubt they'd allow it. Now that we're not part of the potential solution, what place do we have there? I don't even know if we would have been able to go, even if we had agreed to foster them. Courts here are typically very closed off. The hardest part is accepting that I'll probably never see the boys again. Still, if there's a way for me to keep tabs on them, I hope maybe one day, when they're older and have their own phones, maybe in 10 years or so, I could reach out to them again. It's a distant hope, but right now, it's something I cling to. CPS is still actively investigating, I know that much. Right before they stopped telling us things, it sounded pretty likely that at least temporary foster care would be necessary. My sister had failed to show up to mandatory meetings, wasn't answering calls when they tried to reach her, and at least once, she showed up at the house alone just as CPS arrived. Turns out the boys had been left at home while she was gone. CPS actually called me, wanting to know if I had any idea where she was or how long she'd been missing from the house, but by then, I had already cut all contact. When confronted, Carlene told them she'd just dropped something off one street over and was only gone 3 minutes. But honestly, I doubt that, and it seemed like CPS didn't believe her either. The reason we can't, and don't want to, take the boys in is mostly due to our health. I have a chronic illness, and my fiancé uses a wheelchair. Our place is a 1-bedroom apartment, and having beds and stuff for the boys would make it totally inaccessible for a wheelchair, which just isn't okay. Beyond that, neither of us wants kids. I know I wouldn't make a great parent, and I can't ask my fiancé to take that on either. He never signed up for any of this. My greatest hope is that the boys are still young enough that placing them, whether temporarily or permanently, won't be too hard. It breaks my heart, but I just can't do it. Thank you to everyone who sent well wishes and support. If there's anything you want to know, just ask. Update 5. I last updated at the end of March, still in the dark about how the family court would handle the custody proceedings. The hearings were scheduled for April, and honestly, the waiting was excruciating. When the day finally came, my sister just didn't show up. No excuse, no notice, nothing, she simply vanished from the process, leaving everyone in limbo. The court didn't let that slide. They set another date for late July and made it clear, if she missed it again, there would be fines, and they sent a certified letter warning her that things would move on without her whether she liked it or not. It was obvious they were tired of her attempts to stall everything by just disappearing. During all this, the boys were placed together with a foster family. The best news came then, this family was open to keeping them as long as needed. They wanted to reconnect, so we met up, not an easy thing after about 10 weeks apart. The boys, now 4 and almost 3, were so shy at first, but I could tell, especially with the older one, there was a flicker of recognition. They'd gotten used to being cautious and quiet, clearly not settled in yet, which nearly broke my heart. But at least now they looked so much healthier, a bit plumper, livelier skin, just more vibrant. It only struck me then how unwell they used to look until I saw the change for myself. July rolled around, another court date, and still there was no sign of my sister. The court had to decide, do they proceed as if she's abandoned her kids, arrest and hold her, or just send yet another invitation? As far as I know, we're still waiting for their decision. Apparently, it was quite unusual to have these kinds of custody issues with no legal guardian or parent even present. Who would have thought? I just wish all of this was over, but of course, that's not up to me. What I can do is keep building my relationship with the boys. I see them about once a week, sometimes with my fiancé, sometimes alone. We could ask to end the supervised visits, but there's just no rush. They need all the protection and stability possible, they really don't have anyone else. Looking back, I still believe we made the right choice not to take them in ourselves. My fiancé came down with a scary case of pneumonia over the summer. We barely made it through that, and there's no way we could have handled all that and cared for the boys at the same time. We aren't allowed inside the actual court proceedings, but since I'm the boys' closest relative who stays in touch, CPS keeps us as updated as possible, especially now with our resumed visits. I'm as content as I can be with how things are. I wish, every single day, that none of this had happened. There's this gnawing guilt, like maybe my sister's mental health only fell apart after I started pushing back, and now she's a stranger, even though I haven't seen her in months. My fiancée tries to reassure me, saying her breakdown was inevitable, that it just happened to take place now. So I do what I can, show up for the boys, wait for the courts, and hope for the best, all the while wishing desperately that we could have all been spared from this mess. Update 6. I honestly didn't think I'd be writing another update so soon, but everything changed last week in the most unexpected way. I'm still processing it all, and my fiancé thinks I'm crazy for even considering what I'm about to tell you. So remember how my sister Carlene had been completely MIA from all the court proceedings? Well, turns out she wasn't just hiding from CPS and the courts, she'd apparently been living with some guy named Marcus about 2 hours away. I only found this out because Marcus showed up at my workplace last Tuesday, asking to speak with me. At first, I thought he might be another one of Carlene's flying monkeys, so I was immediately on guard. But Marcus seemed different. He was genuinely upset, saying he'd only just found out about the boys being in foster care and that Carlene had been lying to him this entire time. According to him, she'd told him her kids were staying with their loving aunt while she sorted out some housing issues, and that the court stuff was just bureaucratic nonsense about updating custody paperwork. Here's where it gets really twisted. Marcus has been financially supporting her for months, thinking he was helping a struggling single mom get back on her feet. He'd been paying for her phone, giving her money for the boys' expenses, even bought her a car because she said she needed reliable transportation to see her kids. The whole time, she was apparently telling him I was the villain who'd stolen her children and turned them against her. But Marcus isn't stupid. When Carlene kept making excuses about why he couldn't meet the boys or why our family visits had to be supervised by court order, he started getting suspicious. He did some digging, found the public court records, and realized she'd been lying about pretty much everything. The conversation got even weirder when he asked if I knew she was pregnant. I nearly choked on my coffee. Apparently, Carlene is about 4 months along and has been hiding it from everyone, including, it seems, the courts and CPS. Marcus is the father, and he's been talking about marriage and wanting to do right by the family, completely unaware that she's been avoiding her legal obligations to her existing children. After Marcus left, I spent the rest of the day in this strange fog. Part of me felt vindicated. Finally, someone else could see through Carlene's manipulations. But another part of me felt this crushing weight. She's bringing another child into this chaos while she can't even take care of the 2 she already has. I called the CPS caseworker immediately and told her about the pregnancy and Marcus. The caseworker seemed both surprised and concerned, especially since Carlene hasn't been showing up for any of her mandated services or evaluations. Apparently, being pregnant during custody proceedings can complicate things significantly. There are additional resources and considerations, but only if the parent actually engages with the process. The foster family has noticed the boys asking more questions lately about when they'll see mama again. The 4-year-old especially seems to understand that something permanent might be happening. It breaks my heart because I don't know what to tell him, and neither do his foster parents. But here's the part that's really messing with my head. Marcus asked if I'd be willing to meet with him and Carlene together. He thinks maybe we can work something out as a family, that maybe she just needs support to get her act together. He seems genuinely convinced that if we all just sit down and talk, everything can be resolved. My fiancé thinks this is absolutely insane and potentially dangerous. He reminded me about her showing up at our door, trying to grab me, kicking the door. He's worried this is just another manipulation, with Marcus as her new weapon. But I keep thinking about those boys, and this new baby on the way. What if this is actually Carlene's chance to get her life together? What if Marcus is the stability she's always needed? But then I remember all the promises she broke, all the lies, all the times she used her children as pawns against me. I told Marcus I'd think about it, but honestly, I have no idea what the right answer is. The court date is finally set for next month. Apparently they've decided to proceed without her if she doesn't show up this time. The boys might have a chance at permanent placement with their foster family, who've been nothing but loving and stable. Do I risk everything by getting involved again? Or do I let the courts handle it and focus on being the aunt who shows up for weekly visits? I never thought I'd say this, but I actually miss the simplicity of just being angry at her. Now everything feels complicated and uncertain again. Update 7. I wish I could say I made the smart choice and stayed away from that meeting with Marcus and Carlene. But honestly, the curiosity was eating me alive, and some naive part of me thought maybe, just maybe, this could actually lead somewhere positive for the boys. So I agreed to meet them at a neutral location, a coffee shop about halfway between where I live and where they've been staying. My fiancé was furious with me, but he insisted on coming along and waiting in the car, just in case things went sideways. The first red flag should have been that Carlene looked different. Not just the pregnancy, which was barely showing, but she had this weird, manic energy. She kept touching Marcus's arm, laughing too loudly at things that weren't funny, and making these grand gestures like she was performing in a play. Marcus, meanwhile, looked exhausted and kept checking his phone. The conversation started normal enough, Marcus doing most of the talking about wanting to bring the family back together and how he was willing to get a bigger place, help with childcare, provide stability. He seemed genuine, if completely naive about what he was dealing with. But then Carleen started talking, and it was like watching a master manipulator at work. She had this whole sob story prepared about how her postpartum depression from her youngest had never been properly treated, how she'd been struggling with mental health issues, how losing me as her support system had sent her spiraling. She even cried, real tears and everything, talking about how she'd made mistakes but just wanted her family back. For a moment, I almost bought it. Almost. Then Marcus excused himself to use the bathroom, and the mask just dropped. Carleen leaned across the table and hissed at me that I'd destroyed her life and that she was going to make sure I never saw those boys again once she got them back. The speed of the transformation was genuinely chilling. When Marcus returned, she was back to her performance, but I was done. I told them both that I thought it was great Marcus wanted to help, but that my involvement needed to stay limited to my weekly visits with the boys. Carleen's face went stone cold, but she kept up the act for Marcus's benefit. As I was leaving, Marcus followed me out to the parking lot. That's when things got really interesting. He started asking me specific questions, about Carleen's patterns, about her relationship with the boys, about why I'd really called CPS. It became clear that despite being manipulated, he wasn't stupid. He'd noticed inconsistencies in her stories and was starting to piece things together. The bombshell came when he told me that Carleen had been talking about getting rid of the pregnancy. Not in a casual way, but in a panicked, desperate way. Apparently, she'd been researching late-term options and had been secretive about her prenatal care. Marcus was horrified because he genuinely wanted this child, but Carleen seemed to view the pregnancy as just another complication in her plan to get the boys back. That night, I couldn't sleep. Something about the whole interaction felt wrong, like I was missing a crucial piece of the puzzle. So I did something I probably shouldn't have. I looked up Marcus online. What I found made my blood run cold. Marcus wasn't just some guy Carleen had been living with. He was married. Not separated, not divorced, actively married with a wife and 2 teenage kids in another state. His social media was full of family photos from just a few months ago. I spent the whole next day debating whether to tell him I knew, or whether to tell his wife, or whether to just stay out of it entirely. But then I remembered something Marcus had said about buying Carleen a car and supporting her financially for months. If he was stealing from his actual family to support my sister's lies. I ended up sending his wife a very careful, anonymous message through Facebook. I didn't mention Carleen by name, just said that I had reason to believe her husband was having an affair and supporting another woman financially, and that she might want to look into their accounts. I included a screenshot of the court documents showing Carleen's address, figuring she could connect the dots if she wanted to. The response came faster than I expected. Within hours, I had a message back saying she'd already suspected something was wrong and thanking me for the confirmation. Apparently, Marcus had been lying about work trips and had drained a significant amount from their savings account. 2 days later, Marcus showed up at my workplace again, but this time, he looked like he'd been hit by a truck. His wife had confronted him, threatened divorce, and frozen their accounts. He was suddenly realizing that not only had he been played by Carleen, but he'd potentially destroyed his actual family in the process. The conversation was awkward and painful, but he kept thanking me for opening his eyes. Apparently, once he stopped giving Carleen money and his wife started tracking his movements, Carleen's true nature came out in full force. She'd screamed at him, accused him of abandoning her and the baby, and threatened to tell his wife about the pregnancy if he didn't keep supporting her. But here's where it gets even more twisted. Marcus revealed that Carleen had admitted she wasn't even sure he was the father. She'd apparently been with multiple men during the time frame when the baby would have been conceived, but had chosen Marcus as her target because he seemed the most financially stable and gullible. Now Marcus is trying to salvage his marriage and wants nothing to do with Carleen or the baby. Meanwhile, Carleen has apparently been calling him non-stop, alternating between threats and promises, trying to get him back under her control. The court date is next week, and I have no idea if Carleen will show up or continue hiding. Part of me wonders if she'll try to use the pregnancy to gain sympathy or delay proceedings further, but after seeing her performance at that coffee shop, I'm starting to realize that my sister might be more manipulative and potentially dangerous than I ever imagined. The boys are doing well with their foster family, but I can see the older one is starting to understand that something permanent might be happening. Last visit, he asked me if he was ever going to live with mommy again. I didn't know what to say. I'm scared about what Carleen might do next, especially now that her financial support has dried up and she's facing court alone. My fiancé has been talking about us maybe moving, just to be safe, but I can't abandon the boys now. They've lost enough already. Sometimes I wonder if I made everything worse by getting involved with Marcus and exposing the truth. But then I remember that little boy asking about his mommy, and I think about what kind of environment they'd be going back to if Carleen somehow managed to convince everyone she'd changed. I just pray the court sees through whatever performance she's planning to put on next week.